Welcome to the material we call the Complete Pugilist. We've done material unboxing before. Some of you are familiar with it already. We've got Extreme Boxing, the ABCs of NHB Volume 1. We've got a book on it called Boxing Mastery. In a few minutes we'll tell you how this material works in. But first off, I can tell you who we're aiming this particular material set at. Excuse the clumsy grammar on that one. We're looking for people who are old school boxing enthusiasts. We're talking about, it can be boxing from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, but preferably even much before that. We're not going to give you any of some of the static poses that you're used to seeing, some of the real early days of fighting. With Fig and Broughton and such, but we're going to still touch on some of the principles that these guys used. We're going to show you how to use some of the old school material and bring it into the modern era of boxing. But keep in mind, notice that we're calling this the Complete Pugilist. It's not complete boxing. We're not trying to give you everything there is to know about the Golden Gloves level of boxing, our pro boxing level, even though this will work very well within those confines, because in the old days there were laws of punches that were formally legal or kind of like soft legal on the side. We're going to make sure we include some of those ideas. So I don't want you to get the idea that I'm telling you you could pull these out in Golden Gloves. Not going to happen. This material is also aimed at NHB players, hence you're going to see these light gloves. I'll explain more about that in a moment. And then we're also be aimed at street combative, standard street self-defense. Now, in the street, we're primarily known for, I think, our grappling work. And because our grappling material is vast, we've already got a lot out there. Trust me, there's a lot more to come on it. But there is a lot to say about boxing. But in boxing, we have to admit the material is a bit more finite. We're going to give you a whole lot of our boxing material here, probably very close to about 80–85% of what we would do if you were going to come to us and train one-on-one and say, hey, just keep me on the boxing and the pugilism the entire time. So, again, if you're an old school boxing enthusiast, a standard modern boxing enthusiast, an NHB player, or you're just looking for street self-defense, you're going to find a lot within this material to make you happy. I'm going to make sure we understand how this kind of fits in with our other material. We've got lots of submission material out there, lots of grappling material out there, but we do have one product called the Complete Grappler. Now that name in one sense is a misnomer because it says complete. It's not everything there is to know about grappling, but it is complete in the sense it's everything you need to know to get started and get moving. And staying with that same theme, this is going to be everything you need to know to get started and get moving from a novice, beginner, intermediate, advanced level as far as the pugilism boxing is concerned. Now we've got our material on extreme boxing. You're going to see some of that material repeated here. Now we seldom do any kind of repeats, but to make sure that we can be as complete as possible, you're going to see some of that material. But with the differences you're going to see, there's going to be some tweaks on some of the old stuff. So if you already consumed that previous material, don't sweat it. This is going to be some updates, some tweaking to what's going on. Extreme boxing is really devised for people who said, I want enough boxing to get me by. I mainly want to emphasize on my shooting and my grappling work, but I still want to be a damn good boxer. Extreme boxing can do that for you. Now this material, the Complete Pugilist, is going to make sure that you go, all right, I've mastered that extreme stuff. I'm going to go back and make sure that my fundamentals are good, because a lot of us realize that's where the fight really is, how good your fundamentals are, and then you want to take it beyond the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step. That's what this stuff is all about. Now, we also have boxing on the first volume of the ABCs of NHB. We show you some flow drills. As a matter of fact, we show you 20, then we reverse those and show you how to turn that to 40 different drills. Rather, since flow drills, counterpunching drills can keep going on, moving on to the stratosphere with as creative as you want to be with the chains, we're just going to take one counterpunching chain within the confines of this material, because we're going to assume that you've already consumed the ABCs of NHB Volume 1. And if you haven't, I think that one really works well with this material. Now, in our book, Boxing Mastery, you're going to see some of that material repeated here, but again, this Complete Pugilist will embrace a lot of that stuff, the other three products I just mentioned, and greatly expand upon it, where Boxing Mastery can be added whenever it comes time to talk about strategy, how to fight the slugger, how to box a tall opponent, the rusher, the infighter, the southpaw, or the open stance, the closed stance fighters. Lots of the ideas for building up some of the power punching and stuff, which are really more about talking about theory, are best explained in a lecture. Since this is a visual medium, I'm not going to discuss that here. I would say, hey, pick up that book. It's an inexpensive buy. It's a really nice companion piece to what you're going to see going on here. A couple more things before we get going. Occasionally, whenever you do, I should have said this right up front, when you see me occasionally look off to my left, it's because there is so much material for me to cover. I want to make sure I'm doing this in the right order for you so we can stay on the same page. Speaking of that, I do have notes that are off to my left, so occasionally when you see me doing this, not interested in you. I mean, I am interested, but I'm just make sure you understand that I've got to look over here and make sure that we're keeping everything nice and codified for you. The first portion of this material, well, the large majority of it right up front, is going to be me talking and then going through showing you the moves with it, the footworks and the stands and introducing all the punches, and then later on you're going to see me start bringing a partner out, and this time it's going to be Mitch Thomas, really good wrestler, and he's a good boxer as well. You're going to see a huge disparity in the weight and the size differences there, but that's good for you. It's best for you to always fight up if you can, makes you a better fighter. Also, throughout this material, you're going to notice that I fight southpaw. I mean, I'm naturally right hand as far as sight of my name and stuff, but I do fight in a southpaw position. I explain that in a lengthy essay in one of our books, Savage Strikes. And just a real quick hit on why we do that. I really believe in fighting coordinated side forward, particularly if you're fighting with lighter weight gloves, particularly, these days in amateur and stuff, you can have 16-ounce gloves and stuff. These are basically pillows or mufflers on your hands. The old days, the gloves were lighter. In NHB or the street, you either got light gloves or no gloves whatsoever. The reason a lot of the fighting was done with the power side of the rear is because you had to really load up to make this 16-ounce glove do some damage. So you wanted to put your strong side at the back so you could get some extra wind-up out of it. With the lighter gloves or going bare-fisted, coordinated side forward makes more sense because you can be more precise and pinpoint accurate with your punches, and also that kind of equalizes out the pressure at that point. You got light gloves, both hands start having a little bit of dynamite in them. So there's a little bit more to the reasoning on why we do the southpaw stance. You can find that in Savage Strikes if you care to take a look. If not, if you think, no, I'm going to stick with my orthodox stance, not a problem. Just take everything. All this material will work for you all the same. Just going to go ahead and explain right up front. I know I'm fighting backwards to many orthodox fighters. Again, why the light gloves? I've already said this, because more often than not, NHB, which is where my main love I lean towards, is the fact that you're going to find gloves of this size. And the old school boxing gloves were closer to what this weight size was. Also get you closer to what it feels like when you're in the street, closer to the open hand, closer to, as close as you can get to bare knuckle without busting your hands up all the time. You got to save your hands so you can keep playing the sport. And then we've also got to keep in mind that when we have the extreme boxing material out there, also when we did our ABCs of NHB Volume 1, a lot of you were very kind to talk about how much the material was useful to you, but some of you did wonder, well, that drill works because you were wearing those boxing gloves. They wouldn't necessarily work if I was bare-fisted or were using lighter gloves. Au contraire, I mean, they do work, and I make sure I'm going to go through all this material on the Complete Pugilist using this size gloves to make sure you understand street fighters and the NHB guys can use this, and you make sure if you can use it with the light gloves, you're going to be able to do this just as easily, if not easier, anytime that you're wearing 8 ounces up to 16-ounce gloves. Now, everything we're going to be doing in the Complete Pugilist is going to be you, a mirror, or a shadow boxing, or you with a partner who's got focus pads, or just geared up with the same sort of gloves as you've got. Here we are going through all of this material, and you might be asking yourself, well, where's all the boxing training equipment? Where's the heavy bag, the light bags, the maze ball? Where's some of the jump rope material? Where's the medicine ball? Where's the double end bag and the speed bags and such? There's so much there's a wealth of information to be said about how to drill this material. I mean, you can pound a heavy bag mindlessly. You can just, you can tinker around with a speed bag or a double end bag, and there's a lot to be said for using these pieces of training equipment, but the material there is so vast, I prefer to save that subject for another day. Make sure everything we do right now is all you need is yourself, a mirror, and a training partner, so you can get to the pure sport of pugilism, which is about you throwing punches, having punches thrown back at you. It's offense and defense, and make sure solo equipment, a topic for another day. We're going to make sure this entire material is about you hitting people and not getting hit. We got a little while to go before we actually get to start throwing some punches. Bear with me. We got to cover lots of fundamentals right up front. Since we are talking about punching throughout this entire material, we're going to make sure that we can make a fist. And I've discussed this before. It's so short of a thing to review. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way. Make sure you know how to roll a fist properly. To properly roll a fist, you roll from the small finger in. It's not the reverse. Coming here, you're going to make sure you're tightening the pack of the fist from this small finger. Just roll it to the inside like that, and then curl that thumb over the index finger and middle finger knuckles. It's not going to be pointing at the side or tucked to the inside. It's right in here. It's rolling the fist. In our contact area with the fist, it's actually the flat of the back three knuckles. We're not going to hit with the upper edge of the knuckles, but the entire flat area. Kind of disperses this energy to some degree and make sure that we're focusing all of our impact on a small portion of bone. Makes it easier to get some bone chips or boxing fractures. Main thing is you're not looking to hit with these front three knuckles, the index finger and the ring finger. This is a misnomer. I hear this material repeated all the time. Again, all I can tell to people is find yourself a concrete wall, take your gloves off, and put those first two knuckles against the wall. Stand back and really drive your hand through that. You're going to feel the pressure on the front two knuckles. You're going to feel your wrist buckle to some degree. Now switch this off, lay the flat of the back three knuckles against the wall, and then drive through. You're going to feel the stability in your wrist and the like. Now that's the position that you need to be hitting in. Just again, if you either take my word for it, roll it properly, hit with the back three knuckles, or you can actually do the pressing against the wall test to find out for yourself. Okay, once you got the fist down, we got to still move on. We're not hitting yet. We got to make sure we discuss stance. Now, this is where we're going to do some slight tweaking from the extreme boxing. In extreme boxing, we're going to make sure that you are throwing punches in an NHB environment where you're also worried about the takedown coming against you the entire time. Now, here in the Complete Pugilist, we're going to assume right now that we're looking at people who really love the boxing game, the pugilism game, and like I said, the street game. If you wanted to apply it to NHB, I would refer to the extreme boxing where we use a bit of a wider stance because we're trying to make sure that we can also shoot from that stance and defend against the takedown. Now, in straight boxing, your stance is going to be a bit more narrow. What you're going to have two basic stances, even though there's really more ways to cover up a lot of it. We got the peekaboo cover up, we got the Jeffries crouch and such, and we cover those to some degree in the book Boxing Mastery. But keep in mind, most of those stances there, those are defensive stances, and that's meant to be in a game with larger gloves and where the fight can stretch on for 12 rounds or 15 rounds in the old days of the 15 rounds. Here we're talking about fights that are a much shorter duration because we're either talking about the 3 rounds in amateur fighting or we're talking about the NHB or even the shorter no-round fighting of the street. When you're doing the long-range stance, basically it's going to be one natural step forward. Again, I'm a southpaw, so this right foot comes forward. One natural step forward, again, not a long step, so from the side, just natural step, as such. Now, you've got to imagine a line coming off your heel, coming off the back heel and coming forward. Whenever it comes forward on that same line, I'm going to toe in and touch where that line would be. So you see, if I drag this back, I'm this unnatural heel-toe version right here, like as if I'm trying to walk a tightrope. So I'm walking this tightrope, and then I step this forward, so I've got this toe pointed slightly to the inside, and then I'm turning my chest towards the opponent. I'm not staying off to the side. This is going to cut off me. It can wind up and give me a little bit more wind up in this rear hand, but it cuts off too much from this lead arm. It's going to, for me to get my lead hook in, I'm going to have to telegraph too much with it. So I've got the toe in stance, one natural step forward, drawing the line, but I got to make sure I turn and square the body up a bit. Now this knee is still slightly in, and this can still work with NHB, except I would actually spread the stance out a little bit more and to some degree start facing off. Again, as we play the entire way with extreme boxing, but here we're concerned with just being the pugilist that we want to be from this material. So we got the toe in, square the chest off. That's all there is to the stance. And I suggest, if you're not used to it, since the stance is so fundamental, it's easy to want to watch this material, and probably some of you have already done this. You see me standing here talking, you got your finger, your thumb on the fast forward button, you start moving through all these frames, you're trying to find the stuff where I start throwing some stuff, but this is fundamental. I would actually recommend going through a few rounds where you take your natural step forward and turn off and make sure you get that toe in. Find out whichever your right or left forward, get the toe in and make sure that line is in the right spot. Actually go to the trouble of doing the drag back. Find out if you're too wide and you pull back, you went, well, the toe doesn't touch the heel. You're wrong, it's got to touch the heel every time. Natural step out, toe into the heel. You're wrong if you step out, it comes behind the heel. You're wrong if you step out. This is actually more common, and your feet are side by side because it makes you realize then if you start turning your chest into it, you're basically standing off in a variation of a side stance, almost look like you're trying to do a T stance from some traditional martial art. So natural step forward, toe in, draw the line. Face off with your chest, square up with your opponent. Now the hand position, rear hand, very much like we do in extreme boxing. We're going to make that fist. Again, this is a relaxed fist. There's no reason to tense anything in your body until it's time to make impact with something. Same thing when we're throwing the punches. We don't clench a fist the entire way. It closes at the last moment. Sometimes whenever you see us throwing the punches in the shadow boxing or in the mirror work, you actually see the hands open when we're throwing, trying to get some relaxation in our body. Rear hand, a relaxed fist, loose against the cheek. In here, we got the elbow pulled in tight to the body. Now, with the lead arm looks somewhat open initially whenever you're trying to teach boxing enthusiasts, or particularly if you're coming off the extreme boxing material where I showed you a nice closed-up cage position. The long-range stance is assuming we're slightly on the outside. I'm going to turn this profile momentarily. We've got the rear hand in proper position. I've toed in, natural stance, and I've squared off. The lead hand is going to come in front of this shoulder, my lead shoulder. Lead hand's in front of the shoulder, the same level with it. Notice it's not up high. It's right here, same level with the shoulder. So you're right here from this side, not up here. Also very, very important whenever we're doing this, I think the overhand will probably catch this even better, is it's not to the outside of the shoulder, because we see how this opens up this jawline right through here. It's not to the inside of the shoulder. Some people think this feels better because it can to some degree feel better because you feel the protection across your liver. At the same time, though, it actually, if we turn to the side, look straight down, we see it still opens up this jawline versus hooks. So what we've got to have is in front of the shoulder. This gives us enough. It's a small motion to get this hand in front of the elbow, in front of the liver. Small motion right here, slightly hunch this to the outside and stop off when that hook's coming in. It's right here. This is wrong, this is wrong, this is correct. Also notice the forearms are parallel. There is no inverted V. It's got to be right here, parallel the entire time. No point. This is a very natural way to stand with the elbows to the outside. But you notice this is what opens the liver up, the body up the entire time. You kill the body, the head will follow. You got to protect the body. So this elbow is always down, parallel with this elbow right in front of this shoulder. Now the head position, the chin must be down. Ultimately, all the way through this, I would have this from the profile. You would see I would always be down with this sullen look with my eyes rolled up, looking forward the entire time. The chin would be buried this much. And the only time you're really going to see me do this is right now while I'm demonstrating it, because I have to have my head up to speak to you for the remainder of this material. So every time you see me throwing a punch, I should optimally be chin tucked back. But probably through a lot of this, because I will not shut my face, I'll have the head up so I can talk to you. But here is where the position should be, looking forward. So we've got the parallel, we got this in front of the lead shoulder, we got the chin down, and notice we slightly have a hunch up on the lead shoulder. If we drop this out of the way, we can see naturally the shoulder would be right here, but we can see this exposure along the neckline and the jawline and the ear line. Just a small bringing up the shoulder, and notice we got the chin drop down at the same time. You see how much coverage we have here from the side? If I'm in a natural position, open up the jawline, the chin line. Here, this takes care of it. Again, this is talking about we're almost micromanaging details. We covered a stance in detail in extreme boxing, but I feel like here we're trying to correct all the little things that were left out, either by my error or things that kind of pop out whenever you're going around and people have seen that material, and we can kind of tweak things for you. So, long range stance, toe in, forward, square up. Right here, this position. There's your stance. Now, as we close in, obviously, we have to assume I've got my big invisible opponent right here. We're talking about an outside stance as we're both outside jabbing range. We're moving around. We're probing with each other. This is where this long range stance comes into play. Once we start getting medium range or close to the inside, obviously, this is too exposed. That's when we'll start pulling our hands back, looking closer to the extreme boxing stance, and we start building a cage for our head. So when you hear build a cage, that means you're in the inside stance. This hand is already back in proper position. This elbow's in proper position. The only difference here is this hand now pulls back and mirrors what this is doing. So we still have these parallel forearms, no inverted V. So all that happened was went from here to here. We see that? That's the only change in the stance. We just got to recover from here to here. So you got your long range stance, we're toed in on the line, natural step forward, square it up, and your in stance, just build a cage, pull back. And again, on building that cage, it's even more important to have that chin down. I'm going to have this all the way pulled in, looking forward as such. I'll drop these hands out of the way so you can see how much the chin is hunched down. It's an unnatural look, but trust me, you're going to, whenever you hide that chin up, particularly if you get on the inside, it's going to be very, very important. Now, if you got your stance down, you've got your long range down, you got your close stance down, we've got to start talking about, again, it's a fundamental. I would actually, as I said, spin around, stepping into these things, making sure everything's pulled in, toed in properly, looking yourself in the mirror, making sure things pull right back in. Big important thing is to watch, make sure this hand's in the right spot, look for the inverted V. You've got to start talking about how to do your footwork. Everyone talks about footwork all the time. We covered footwork to a somewhat detailed degree in extreme boxing, but we've got to build on it here because you're wanting footwork at extreme boxing, since it was for the NHB game, blocking off the shoot, did not have to be as involved because we were talking about stuffing the takedown here. Here we're talking about primarily a striking game, and we're talking about being able to have a little bit of a higher base. And again, with the footwork, you got to think of your hands as your body is an entire military unit, where your hands are going to be your artillery, and your feet are obviously the way to get your artillery to this or in and out of harm's way. So people hear footwork, and you just see them bouncing around and moving and think, well, I step forward and I step and drag. That's all there is to it. But actually, we're going to subdivide that and get a little bit retentive with it to make sure you understand how to play the game. A couple of things to keep in mind. Well, more than a couple, to be honest with you, as you can imagine, as much as I've already talked at the beginning of this thing. When you're moving, you got to keep your feet at least a shoulder width apart. I mean, it's vital whenever important whenever someone might be shooting in on you. As soon as your legs are close together, it's easy to take you down, drop your ass down on the mat. Same thing, though, in boxing, in the sense that if the time my feet are too narrow, I've got to do it's easier to read my hip transfer. Whenever I'm in this position, it's easier to start, when you start getting an eye for it, you can start seeing this slight upward transfer of my weight as I step my legs out from underneath me. If I got them shoulder width apart, the transfer of weight is a little bit harder to read. I can keep my hips in one plane. There's no up and down. I'm exaggerating it right now, obviously, but it's harder to change that. There's an actual have to shift your pelvic carriage over to make the step out. Shoulder width apart. It's a little bit easier, harder to read these slight movements and stance. Notice I'm always coming back to pay attention to the toe, the heel-toe line. So shoulder width apart the entire time. The other thing you've got to do is resist the urge to bounce, to hop around, to dance. Obviously, we're talking about this sort of thing right here. Now, it looks great. People have a lot of fun doing this, and there's some fantastic boxers who still use it. But some of the reasons we're not going to use it, in case you're taking this material and transferring it to the NHB game, you're talking about anytime you're hopping, you just got to read that hop. It's time to shoot in on that guy. At the same time, whenever someone's hopping, that's the time to hit the guy. He's off balance. Even if your punch comes out as a shove, you're still going to make this guy have a stumble look to him. The judges notice that, the audience notices that, the spectators notice that, and also the fighter who gets stumbled, even if he knows that punch didn't really hurt, he's got to psychologically recover from that and prove that nothing happened from it. So you can resist these accidental slips or shoves if you keep yourself from dancing around the entire time. Other reason you're not going to dance, it blows energy. I don't care if you still said, well, I run all day, I do squats all the time, and I've done a lot of, I skip rope all the time. Fighting is, it just saps the energy out of you. Obviously, if you're looking at this material, you've already done some fighting. You've played around with it. You got to save energy where you can. You got to make sure all your energy is going to your punches and going into your strategy and not all this superfluous material. So no bouncing around, no dancing. Also, whenever you're moving the entire, you should always be thinking about step and drag. There should always be a 1 foot minimum in contact with the mat. So that tells you right there, bouncing and dancing. Bad news. Also, when we're stepping, it's optimum, not always possible, to always have both feet in contact with the mat if possible. So if I'm talking about if I'm going to step off with this rear foot, it races off the mat and this one will drag to it. That would be a step and drag. There's a step and there's a drag. What I'm trying to do is make sure, since there's always contact, I'm trying to increase the amount of time that you are always in contact with the mat, because a standard step would just be step, pick up the foot, step, pick up the foot. We're trying to make sure there's one moment when this foot is off the mat. One moment whenever we are talking about we're almost at an 80% weight disadvantage, and then we drag the other foot up to reduce the amount of time that we're not in contact. This is a small concept, but it really pays off huge. A lot of people think step and drag, they hear it, they practice it, and they think they know step and drag. Then as soon as you start watching them in a fight, people go back to standard stepping. So in your footwork, you got to make sure that you are trying to step and drag and everything. All the footwork drills I'm getting ready to show you, you're going to play them with the rounds, with a round timer. Everything I'm going to show you, I would say do with a round timer. Set up a round timer, give 3-minute rounds of every single thing I show you. That's the optimum way to approach this material. Even if it's retentive and you're an advanced boxer and you go, hell, I don't want to step and drag again. Do it. 3-minute rounds, then move on to the next thing. Then eventually you're going to start codifying and switching this material around. There's a hell of a lot of material and the subject matter we're presenting to you. We're going to make sure it's how you mix and match it and put it back together. So we've already talked about the fundamentals, no dancing, we're toeing in, we're stepping and dragging. And again, I'm going to leave my hands loose right now so we can watch what's going on with the feet. First, it's just going to be a standard step and drag forward. It's exactly what it sounds like. I will push off with the rear foot or the lead foot, steps forward, never more than 6 to 8 inches. Anything more than that compromises my weight too much. It's too long to recover. In boxing, we're talking about speed and power. I'm going to have more power of my weight if I have my legs underneath me than if I've got them spread out. I've got more speed, the same thing if my my legs are underneath me, then spread out. You think about sprinters taking off from the blocks, their legs are crouched up underneath them. You don't see them crouching way out in this position. There's no speed out of this, there's no power out of it. You got to be coiled, have everything underneath you. So we're talking about kind of an extended version of that. From the side, when I step out, a step and drag shouldn't be this long motion. Just gonna small, 6, 7, 8, 10 inches maximum, move forward. So step and drag forward, push off with the rear foot, there's the step, drag forward. Same thing, we step and drag forward, step and the drag to the rear. Again, this is anal retentive at this point. And again, if you already box, do any sort of martial art, at this point you're thinking, I can't believe he's spending this much time on this. But while I'm doing it, you'll notice that I'm always paying attention to the heel-toe line. I step forward, a lot of this is where people start going awry. They step forward, the toe turns out, this toe turns forward, they start coming in. Stance just went to shit. You've got to go from here, I'm in the proper position, to here. I can stop and recheck my stance. I'm right where I need to be. If I step to the rear, driving off the lead foot and back, I'm in the proper stance the entire time. Step, drag forward, and to the rear. Now, when we're stepping and dragging, we went forward and back. Let's take to either side. And on either side, instead of saying step right or step left, we're going to talk about inside and outside. If I move towards my chest, this is going to be to my inside. I'm moving to the inside of my body. So I'm going to step, I'm going to drive off with the lead foot, rear foot makes the step, and drag. Notice I'm still back in the heel-toe line. If I move towards my back, moving towards the outside, away from my body, this is outside. Drive off the rear foot, step, drag. So this is inside to the chest, outside, inside, outside. And pay attention to the inside and outside, because later I'm going to start calling this out again and again. I'm going to move to the inside, going to move to the outside, make sure you know what I'm talking about. Now, when you're doing your steps and you're dragging, I'm talking about moving off of a foot. Two other things to keep in mind, really getting detailed here. When I'm driving, I'm always using the ball of the foot, but I'm using the inside ball of the foot. As you know, we got the two balls on the foot, sounds inappropriate to say, we got the inside, and we've got the outside. If I'm moving forward, it's that inside that kind of toes in, dips in a little bit and drives. From the side, it's really subdividing material here, but it's this that allows me to move forward. Whenever I'm moving back, inside, ball of the foot. I'm going to the outside, inside, ball of the foot. Inside, ball of the foot. What I'm trying to get away from is so you're not flat foot pushing. If you do this very slowly, flat foot pushing, you realize you're actually rolling towards this outside ball of the foot, and it starts rolling the ankle, and there's no real power out of this. When you watch a sprinter take off, you don't see them rolling their ankles to the outside. I know this is exaggerated, just to give you the idea, but it's always going to be the foot slightly towards that inner edge. So inside, step forward, inside, as we go to the outside, inside, ball of the foot as we go to the inside. And one more thing to keep in mind, optimally, you're always moving, you're going to step in the direction you want to go, which means, for example, if I'm wanting to go forward, I'm going to use the leg that's closest to that direction. The lead foot will move to take me to the lead position. If I'm going to go to the rear foot. I'm going to move to the outside, the foot closest to the outside. Inside, vice versa the entire time. What I don't want to do, I don't want to go forward by bringing this up and then in. And then this is all in proper technique that I'm doing right now. Hopefully we can already see from some of the previous examples why. I'm bringing my feet too close together. It's closer than shoulder width apart. And also by stepping in, I can't use the inside of the ball of the foot anymore. Here I'm actually, and the drag wouldn't make any sense. As I'm stepping in this way, dragging the inside ball of the foot, there's no speed, there's no power, there's nothing that can come from this that's any benefit to you as a fighter. There's going to be a lot more here in the footwork, but the step and drag going forward, into the rear, to the inside and the outside, and we'll all build out of these positions, and you got to really subdivide and think about step and drag in the direction you need to, move that foot closer to the direction, make sure you're firing off of the inside ball of the foot, and this should cure a lot of the footwork woes. Even if you think you don't have any, I want you to go back to those three-minute rounds and really think about all these tiny little micro details. We're going to take a look at a stance shift now. Stance shift is pretty much what the name sounds like. I've got a lead foot forward for the stance. I'm going to change the orientation where I have the rear foot forward in the stance. And again, it should be fairly obvious where this is being used. We have a quick retreat going on. We've already used a step drag retreat. we need to buy ourselves even more time. It could be for a shoot, it could be a lunging kangaroo hook, Floyd Patterson style. We're talking about driving off that inside ball of the foot at this point. I shouldn't even be having to mention that because we know how important these things are in the nice stance. Drive off that inside ball of the foot and step back. From the side, inside, step back. Whenever you do step back, notice on the change of the orientation, everything else about your stance should hold constant except we're just in a mirror image of itself. At that point, you should be able to drag the toe back and hit the heel line. The hands would come up and stay in the exact same position. Again, I'm being lazy with the hands now, the upper body, because I'm wanting us to focus down here at the ground level. So drive off. Back on the stance shift. And again, it should, since we're trying to make sure that we're having a quick transfer, the stance shift should not be done in a lazy fashion. So we got hands up. We're trying to move back quickly. We're really trying to get out of that line. So in the profile version here, and back, forward, and back. Now you're wondering how to get back to your natural stance forward. I'm not saying that you have to say, well, now I was fighting southpaw, now I'm fighting orthodox. Should I be training just as hard on the other side? No, you can use your stance shift, move back, and then dance yourself out, and then bring yourself back into your proper stance orientation. It's just really meant a fast way to get out of position, a little bit faster than you step and drag. Now, we still got to talk about everything we've done so far has been down straight line. We've been linear with everything. We've been straight forward, straight back, off of the lateral on the outside and on the inside. I got to start talking about these 45-degree angles. We've got this pocket over here, got a pocket to the inside at 45, the rear at 45, and also again to the rear outside at 45. Optimally, if we were looking straight down on top of me, we've got ourselves drawn, we've got ourselves an X, and then we draw ourselves two more lines. Then we've basically got ourselves an asterisk going on at this time. So to make our steps to the 45 degrees and forward to the outside, again, it's a step and drag. This foot is closer to that angle. So this foot will move first, driving off that inside ball of the foot, step and drag into position. So 45 and outside, forward, step and drag into position. To move to this inside pocket angle, we got to assume that as I'm facing you on camera, as you're watching this thing on your screen, I'm talking to you, you're in the opponent's position right now. We notice since foot might be slightly closer to this inside 45-degree angle, this is where we have to bust a rule, because you notice if I'm fighting you and I step this foot over, this exposes the back. It gives me no offensive tools unless I'm thinking about spinning back kicks and spinning back fists and stuff, which trust me, that's not what I'm thinking in the least. I'm going to have to take this rear foot is stepping in that pocket in a variation of a stance shift, which we just did along a linear line. So we're here, this foot steps into the pocket. Now, it doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to start turning and facing down this line. This means I'm going to step into this hole and then start gliding myself around to reface you as the opponent. So again, it's a stance shift forward into the 45 inside position. And then let's get that little bit of a pivot, drag that foot around. That'll all come together in a moment when we talk about pivots. So 45 to the outside, just step and drag. 45 to the inside, it's a stance shift, then reposition yourself. Now to the rear 45 angles, we've got the inside angle. Inside angle, this foot's closest to that 45 to the rear, so let's step and drag into that position. So we're here, step and drag, paying attention to the toe end line. To the 45 and rear pocket, it is possible to kind of pivot yourself into it. We'll say that for the pivots. Right now we're going to take a 45 to the rear with this variation of a stance shift like we did at this angle. So we're going to take this lead foot, step it into that 45-degree pocket, and then reposition on our stance. So we're here, facing you, the opponent, back into the stance. So let's take we know what the linear and the linear and lateral angles are. Let's run all those all the way through into the 45. So 45 forward to the inside, to the outside, 45 and forward to the inside with that stance shift. We're going to step and drag to the rear 45 inside, and then we're going to stance shift 45 to the rear. Now you got your stance shifts along these angles. I've kept alluding to the pivot. Here's how the pivot works. At this point, right below the camera right here, there's actually there's a little Sharpie X on the floor. I'm going to put the ball of my foot on that X. So I'm facing you, the opponent, the home viewer. So I'm facing this. To do a pivot, this inside ball of the foot, because we know that's the important one. I'm not going to actually be on both balls of the feet. Inside, that's my pivot point. If I move to the inside, we already know what the inside is. That's towards the chest. Pivot here, turn. I can move all the way off. I can subdivide these angles. Right now I took it all the way off to this, my lateral angle, and I turned and faced in. Well, I can also pivot just slightly to a 45. I can pivot all the way to this inside 45. With the pivot, it is possible to pivot all the way around in a 180. What's the likelihood of that ever coming up? Don't even need to work with it. Probably pivoting all the way over here to this 45 and forward. Probably not worth your time, but definitely a slight pivot to the 45 in the rear and a slight pivot to the 45 off to the lateral angle. Very useful. Now, as a pivot to the inside, same thing. Put the ball of the foot on the X. I'm going to take the pivot to the outside, towards my back. Rear foot moves as I pivot on this inside ball of the foot to the 45 and rear angle, or I could have continued on into the lateral angle. So we're here, there's the pivot. We're here, all the way to the lateral angle with the pivot. Notice with the pivot, there's a tendency, and it's probably a wise tendency, when you take the pivot as you're moving around, to drop your stance a little bit as you move. And the reason we're wanting to do that, if you keep your stance a little bit too high, since we're moving quickly at this awkward angle, there's a tendency to overcorrect your body. Will continue to move with the inertia and start pulling you out of base. So you're going to make sure as I'm pivoting, I'll go low, and then I can bring myself back up to position. So pivot, 45 inside, lateral inside. Notice as I'm dropping the base as I turn. We're going to go to the outside 45, drop the base, outside of the lateral, drop the base on the pivot. What you also have, we can play with this game as a quick retreat. We've already done the retreat with the step and drag to the rear. We've done the stance shift. Quick retreat is we're going to violate a rule. We're usually on the step and drag. We've stepped, push off the lead foot, step with the rear foot, and drag back. On the quick retreat, what we're doing here is we're dragging with the lead foot. We're assuming someone's already coming in. We're going to drag this lead foot back. Notice how I'm actually narrowing up this stance, but notice I'm still doing a heel-toe line here. Drag it in, and then push off the inside ball of the foot with the lead leg. So it's going to be drag, and then push back. Quick retreat. So it still can be somewhat quick. You notice it's a little bit faster than this motion, perhaps not as quick as this motion, but the reason we're doing the quick retreat is perhaps the stance shift puts you in a lead forward that you are just not comfortable with. So let's keep your good side forward on this. So again, this should be straight into you. Again, from the profile, in. Now it's going to be drag, loaded up on the inside ball of the foot, and then straight back on that quick retreat. Another game you can play is called an in and out. This is more like a baiting footwork used for drawing or feinting. It's basically what it sounds like. It's a quick drive off the rear foot into a step and drag forward, then immediate reversal of that, driving off the lead foot to the rear. So from the side, we've got in, out, exactly what it sounds like. It's meant to bait, it's meant to draw. More on drawing later and baiting later. So in, out, into the home viewer. The fighter there at home, just in and out. It's not strictly footwork for defensive capabilities. It's more of an offensive game. You'll see where it comes into play a little bit later. We also have a quick shift, which is similar to this quick retreat, but it's also similar to a pivot. It's kind of combining those two ideas. Here I'm going to do that heel-toe drag off the lead foot. And once I've done that, this foot, the rear foot, is now going to step off to this lateral angle and allow me to turn. So you notice we're combining this pivoting idea, and we're combining the quick retreat idea where we violate the which direction we're going to move with the step and drag. So we pull this and then take a step off to the side. It can be the lateral angle or it can be the 45-degree angle where we drag back into here. Again, it's called a quick shift, straight down the line. Heel toe is just a bit more narrow than we would optimally like it to be. Pull it in and then drive and use your hips to crank around. Don't let your foot make the placement. I'll do this as slowly as possible. Whenever I want my feet to put in play, and then I have to raise my hips and turn myself to face the direction. You'll notice as I step back, I load the hips low. As soon as I step into it, it's the hips swinging to some degree that pulls myself into a position I need to be. It's a small detail, but it's vital. So it's here, let the hips move it around. So a quick shift, pull back, loaded. Again, the quick retreat was just to here, quick shift, here, and the turn. You also have a drop shift. This is actually bringing you underneath an opponent and going to the inside of them. If we can imagine punches coming in high over the head, swings, whatever. I'll do this profile first. This is going to be slight, about a 5-inch drag back, as if I was doing the beginnings of a quick retreat or a quick shift. Slight drag, and then I drop the hips and I turn the knees facing forward. Right now I'm going to say my opponent's in this direction. About 5, 6, 7, 8 inches right here. Drop the hips. Now this foot does a stance shift forward. It's bringing me to the inside fight, directly into his chest. Very useful movement for people to have who've got a Joe Frazier style. You're fighting a taller fighter, a jabber, an out fighter. It's going to be slight drag, point the knees forward, come in. So it's going to be here and low. It's a drag, knees forward, going low at the same time. So we're here and then step forward. So that's a drop shift. Here, and notice I'm coming in with a cage stance. I was in a long stance, drop, coming in with the cage, prepared for that infight. Last but not least, on this footwork, you've got just a rear shift. It's practically the exact same thing as a quick retreat. We're going to get this drag back, move into position. We're moving ourselves all the way back to a defensive position only. That's why I'm showing this at the very end. Everything else, keep your hands high. He's throwing a nice, powerful attack. You're moving back. You think you're out of range, but just in case you're not, we're going to provide kind of a little bit of a defensive blockade. We're going to drag back, move back. This hand stays high. This hand drops low. Lead hand going over the liver. This hand's blocking up in the ribs. Not only this hand would move forward. I got the shoulder up, protecting the jaw. This hand can also be up forward to help protect against punches. So the only difference between this rear shift and the quick retreat is what we do with the hands. So we've got the quick retreat, we're to here, and you've got the rear shift, moving into this hand position. It's moving into this shoulder roll position, drag back, load it up. On your footwork, the way you should drill this, again, the 3 3-minute rounds on each one of these tedious little incremental steps, and then start moving around with some standard shadow boxing. And again, there's a tendency to go through these rounds, learn the footwork, and then you start telling people, improvise, start putting these things together. Then you start to see people back to this, and they go, oh yeah, I'm going to step and drag. And I'm going to bounce around a little bit. Oh, there's a stance shift. And they're going to move back. It should be closer to thinking about, stepping and dragging, and then it could be like, pivoting and moving around, then stepping back into position, and still reducing the temptation to want to bounce around. It's a very high temptation to do that. You've got to reduce that as much as possible. Some other ideas to keep in mind when you're doing your footwork, though, is you want to control the center of the ring, the center of the octagon, or whatever environment you're fighting from. The street, just whatever the center of that particular arena is for you. That's good ring generalship. You've got to have the center. What we mean by that is you always want your back the furthest distance from the closest vertical obstacle that there is. In this case, we've got a blue wall right here. It could be a turnbuckle. It could be a cage. It could be a parked car. It could be a wall in an alley. The thing is, you want to have your back as far away as you can and maneuver your opponent's back. Keep moving him where he's going to be moving into this vertical upright structure. We notice when you're watching a fight, how often do you see the guy leaning on the ropes or leaning on the turnbuckle, or the guy against the cage? How often does he win the fight? The guy who's got his back to the center of the ring, center of the cage, the octagon, whatever, he's the one who's got good ring generalship. He's exercising good footwork or good control of the environment. Now, a lot of people say, well, hey, once you get him on the side, that's not footwork. Yeah, you can use solo footwork drills to make this sort of thing happen. So whenever you're moving around and doing your footwork drills, it's not enough just to think about doing the actual technical side of, I'm doing a stance shift, I'm doing a rear shift. You should also be thinking the entire time about, in this case, I have this Sharpie mark on the floor. My job should be right on top of it, stance shift, move things out, and then try and come right back to center the entire time, always coming back. A lot of people just, you can tell are doing mindless footwork. They start moving around. They don't mind moving themselves back against the wall. When you're watching that, you go, okay, this is someone who's learned technique but has no idea about application. always to the center is where you want to be. If you're playing a footwork drill with a partner, which I advocate highly, where you're not even boxing yet, you're not throwing any punches, you can even take your gloves off to remind you not to do it, is play the game where you're both moving around the ring or the floor and you're constantly trying to be the one who can control the center of this position. As soon as you realize your back is getting close to a wall or to an upright structure, your job is to move away, start wheeling, and coming back to center. And I could bring Big Mitch out here right now, and we could run through this, but again, not going to insult your intelligence. You understand that aspect. I'm going to save him for the good stuff where I actually start throwing the punches. But you get the idea. Do the footwork, but make sure you understand why you're doing the footwork. You got to control the center the entire time. So you've taken those drills, all the footwork techniques, components, try to put them together, and you have an intelligent operating plan about why you're doing them. Let's take one more drill set, and again, you can combine these drill sets any way you want. I'm only going to give you a handful, I think about 6 drills right now, and they're all pretty much mirrors of each other. And then you can start creating your own drills after that. The drills are basically teaching you to retreat. And every time we retreat, we realize retreating doesn't really mean you've left your opponent. It should mean for you that you've left the center of the ring. Your job is always to get back to the center. So you can do this solo or you can play with a partner. So in the first drill, you're going to retreat. And then you've got to circle back to get to the center. In this case, I'm going to retreat and drill 1 and just circle back, moving to the outside. So we're here. I could have been shadow boxing before, shadow boxing or mirror boxing. Whatever I retreat, whatever fashion I want, my job is to circle to the outside, come back to the center position. Again, I'm keeping some of this stock still because you don't want to run out of the confines with the camera can pick up, but you get the idea. So every time I retreat, my job is to move back and then find myself right back in the center position. If you think about how many people you've seen shadow box and just move around with no rhyme or reason, have no idea where they're going. You might have done it yourself, but realize the job is always to come right back to that mark. Retreat, circle to the outside. Also go with the reverse of that drill. Retreat and then start circling yourself to the inside. So you got 2 drills there, and it's not really 2 drills. It's drills so much of, it doesn't matter how you get to the rear with a stance shift or whatever. It's drills just teaching you circle, move back, because obviously you can't retreat and then step back. If you had to retreat, it's because an opponent was in front of you. You can never just get back to the center by going retreat, walk through this barrier, which would be an opponent. It's got to retreat and circle, wheel or pivot, move to the outside. So we talked about retreating, and you have a circled outside. Retreat, you circle to the inside. Well, you can also start, when you're retreating, to get your opponent's mind off of it. Again, you can do these drills with a partner in front of you. Right now, I don't think that's necessary. I'm going to retreat and circle to the outside. Then I'll retreat and circle to the inside. The difference is, on my retreat, I can go ahead, I'm going to fake a jab, throw a feint. If you're actually fighting someone, hit the jab bit, that's okay. But your job is to step back, throw a distraction, because your main goal was like, hey, he got me out of the center, I got to move back to the center. There's such a temptation when someone throws a punch at you. When you move back, you think you got to get set and start throwing your own punches immediately. Keep in mind, boxing, we're starting at the ground level because this is where the fight starts in the first place. I've got to get to this X. I want him off of this. I want his back on the wall, on the turnbuckle, and I want to be back in the center. So your drill is to step back, fake the jab, and start moving off to the outside. Back, fake the jab, so we've got something to think about. Well, your whole goal was to get right back in here before you really start launching your major counterattack. You want to be able to control right here. So first start with retreating, circling. Retreat, put the feint in on top of it with your circling. Then you can start doing this with pivoting, or you can pivot, you can call it a wheel. It's two sides of the same coin as far as the terminology. And again, the pivot we know is digging in with that lead of the inside ball of the foot, pivoting to the outside, pivoting to the inside. You can also call this a wheel. What you're going to be doing is you're going to retreat, wheel, and then start moving back to the center line. You're going to retreat, wheel, or pivot. Start moving yourself back to the inside. Same thing. You can retreat, throw that jab, wheel, and then start moving yourself back to the inside. You do not always have to come back when you're doing your footwork drill where you're always facing forward. Let's say if I'm standing in a clock face, always at noon. In this case, it's useful. You're sitting there watching this thing. I need to be facing the camera, but I can wheel and come back to the center and face any direction I want. The key is, as long as I'm always coming back and taking the center, always envisioning my opponent wherever he is, I want this spot. As soon as he moves me off this spot, my job is to wheel, use whatever footwork I know, and bring me right back in the same position no matter what. So there's a method to the madness with the footwork. You've broken it down by components, recombined it, understand why you have footwork, both offensive and defensively, understand the whole overarching schema of what we're going to do about the center with ring generalship, and then you started wheeling and throwing some feints, pulling yourself back to the center. But so far, all the movement has been self-prescribed, meaning you got to step, you got to retreat, and you got to wheel yourself back to center whenever you wanted. Now, we could have an opponent in front of us moving us around, kind of dictating the motions, but we don't even want to do that yet. We've got to subdivide our education and make sure we're taking incremental steps so you can really concentrate on what you're doing, not start making some small errors that will be magnified when the leather really starts flying. The next one, you can just do a drill, what's called a clapper drill, where you can start moving around, you stay in the center, throwing some shadow boxing. And what you have is a partner who's just giving you, he's going to dictate when you have to shift and what direction you have to go. And the drill could be called the clapper. It's like that cheesy device you used to see on commercials. Matter of fact, Mitch is off camera. I can leave him there, but if Mitch would be so kind, once I explain the drill, I'll stand here and just do some light shadow boxing in front of the camera. Whenever he claps his hands one time, my job is to move back and then start wheeling or circling to the outside. Whenever I come back to the center and I'm back in my shadow boxing, if and when he claps his hands twice in succession, I know I have to retreat, go to the inside. So once, I go to the outside. If I hear two claps, it's to the inside. Again, it's a small thing, but so far, when you get to move back and think, I'm choosing to go this way, I'm choosing to go this way. Most of the time, when you're solo drilling, you've made your choice before you even started your feet moving the retreating direction. You go, I'll circle, outside. That'll be fun. Well, that's not the way the fight will go. Your opponent's going to dictate it. So this kind of steps you towards having your opponent make the decisions for you. You have to respond to his decisions. So I'm throwing the stuff, one clap, I go outside, two, I go inside. So we're here, throwing. Come back to the inside, I'm here. And move off the inside with it. And you get the idea. Again, already Mitch should have a round of applause. That's first contribution to the DVD. There'll be a lot more coming on. But you get the idea. Someone else dictating what you do. Again, it may seem like nothing of a drill, but this is huge. It's one thing to predictate what you're going to do, have someone else start doing it, get you closer to how the fight's going to feel. Do not underestimate the stair-stepping I've given you so far in the footwork. It's very important that it be conducted in this manner. Okay, we ready to punch yet? We're this close. Stay with me. We're almost there. We've talked about the footwork so far when we did the stance, but the footwork, obviously, we're concentrating from the hips down, except whenever we did the rear shift, we got to do the little bit of draping. You got to talk about the movement of the upper body. And this is actually a small topic. You might be thinking, oh, he's getting ready to talk about slipping and bobbing and weaving and ducking and stuff. We'll say that for the defensive section. The small section we're talking about to be able to do two kinds of rhythm. You've got the long rhythm and the short rhythm, and we discussed that a little bit in extreme boxing. We're going to make sure we understand the confines of both the long range stance and the short range stance. It won't take about a moment. Again, you're going to drill it for three-minute rounds, but it's not going to take long to get the idea. The rhythms are just talking about the whole time we're moving around and doing our footwork. And again, I'm going to stand stock still on this so we can isolate what's going up top. And I've got proper hand position. Initially right now, I'm going to drop all that. We're talking about, and the long rhythm means we're in the long range fight right now. We're on the outside. I'm able to use the long stance. If you're doing a long stance, it's pretty clear that you've got someone who's not coming in, banging the body. You're not having to slip in and out to either side to get someone's giving you some good strong punches yet. But you got to make sure your head's still a hard thing to hit. One of the big problems with lots of beginning fighters, even some intermediate, to be honest with you still watch some advanced guys do it, that they start moving around with their footwork, but the body never changes from this position. It's still stock still with whatever's going on, which means, sure, you've moved around, in my case, 180 pounds of mass, but the head is still basically a target. Unless I stay all the way on the outside, it's still something to be hit. So it's amazing how hard it is to hit. Like if anyone's played with a double end bag, which is basically only moving, if you're hitting it right, staying on top of it, only moving about 5 to 6 inches to either side, but it can be really difficult to track with that. You want your head to be very similar to how that double end bag moves, except it won't be moving nearly as quickly. Now I'm in the long range. We've got long rhythm, which is basically a rocking, I'm exaggerating this right now, rocking back and forth. I only need the head to move one head length, meaning from about here forward and back. And whenever I'm doing it, it's a small motion right in here. It's not this big rocking motion. It's very small, but everything else should be moving on. And it won't be able to be constant, because if you're doing it constantly, there's a tendency to keep loading up one foot with more weight and light footing on the other side, and then constantly shifting that back and forth. And it gets to a point where your opponent can start reading that, knowing when the time is hit, time it whenever you're coming into the punch, or if you're shooting, he's going to time the shoot whenever you're leaning away from the punch the entire time. But your job is to make sure if you're there, knowing to, when you're using your footwork, to sometimes be moving that head motion back and forth. There's lots of, when you watch some really good boxers in Golden Gloves, a lot of them start out the first round with great long rhythm and short rhythm. But as fatigue sets in, you'll notice that going to flat-footed footwork is one of the first things to go. Probably the second thing to go is rhythm. The head rhythm just goes out of play. Your job is to be able to keep it all the way through the fight. So you got the long rhythm. It's just a forward and back motion. You can do it from this long range stance, and you can do it from this closed stance with the cage position. The chances, if you're caged, you're running into the inside, and it's time to start taking the head from side to side. And again, it's that one head length. So we're right here, we're subdividing to each side right here. We're not talking about this, not a major sway from here to here, this motion back and forth. You can do it with this cage position. You can do it with the long position if you're playing against someone who's got a nice long jab. Matter of fact, many of you already seen Corey in lots of this material. This guy's got arms like an albatross, and he'll start sticking with stuff from the outside. And so it's good to start using the side to side, so you're never actually leaning into the punch. It's up to you to decide which one works best for you. You can watch some fighters like Ali and stuff who've got a nice long range going. I have a tendency to play more with the short rhythm, just because of the way what my fighting style is, and also to a large degree what my body makeup is. Don't have a great deal of reach about me, so I go side to side, make sure I don't lean into the punch. So a long rhythm is going to be this back and forth, one head length, back and forth, and short rhythm is side to side. Now keep in mind they both have their uses, but I just already let you know my bias. Long rhythm leans you into a punch at times, but again, short rhythm can happen because if a hook's coming along this side and he's timed at the same time, I've leaned myself into a hook. But I still have a tendency to bias on it because it seems to be closer mimicking how hard it is to find the target when you're throwing against a double end bag. So you've got rounds of this upper body rhythm to play with, and at the same time you've got to make sure that you're playing with your stances and moving around and making sure you're getting all the different rhythms around while you're playing. Make sure every stance shift, everything you do is accompanied by a head rhythm. And notice that you're going to have the rhythm kind of offset with the steps. It's tough to do rhythm and step at the same time because one, it's a complex maneuver, but also it takes yourself off base. You're going to find to do a long and short rhythms, you've got to have a nice 50-50 weight distribution. So in slow-mo, it'd be along the lines of, for example, if I did a side step to the outside, it'd be a side step, get myself into a rhythm position, I go back to the inside, side step to the inside. It's not going to be rhythm and try and maintain this at the same time. It's just, that's got a bizarre look on camera right now, but you're going to make sure always moving and making sure it's hard for them to find both the upper body and the lower body. Again, only two ideas to play with the upper body motion, the long rhythm and the short rhythm, but combine that with everything, the groundwork we laid on the footwork. Now we're talking about a nice offensive and defensive fighter. That's where you start putting your offensive arsenal on top of it. By that, yeah, I mean the punching. It's arsenal time. We get to start throwing the punches, the illegal shots, get some elbows in there as well. But first, introduce, you heard him earlier with throwing the clap, Mitch Thomas. Okay, now you may have seen him before from Dynamic Chucks. The guy can throw down chucks like you wouldn't believe. And if you come around to a lot of our seminars, take Mitch with me because this guy's a hell of a wrestler. As you can guess, heavyweight, don't screw up, heavyweight, moves like he's 180, and that's the worst combination. Get ready to have some fun for the rest of this. You don't have to listen to me just talk by myself, but I am going to talk for another minute with him standing right here. As you knew I was going to talk, didn't you?
Maybe you never stop.
We're into the arsenal. The arsenal obviously is everything. All the tools we're going to throw all the punches, the elbows, the illegal shots. When we're throwing all the punches, This is the fun stuff. There's no doubt about it. It's like in the grappling game. Everyone wants to, okay, that was nice. You showed me positioning things. Show me how to break something. That's where the punches come in. Show me how to break something. But just as important as the positive motion of the punch or the offensive tool, the negative portion is just important. What I mean by that, the positive. If I'm throwing the jab on the way and all the way up to contact, positive. Positive for me because I hit him. Negative is the return on it. There's a tendency for people to throw shots, though, fast and then lazier on the way back. Bad call. You got to make sure, I mean the retraction just as much as I meant going to the opponent, going to the target, because if we're both standing like this, we're fairly covered. If I throw the first shot, I've now opened up some slots. This is easier for me to be hit, and if I leave this out there, I have a lazy return, this is the time for him to hit me. So I got to make sure the positive and the negative portions of the shot are treated equally important. You've also to keep in mind we've got to identify the arc or the plane of the tool that we were throwing and return them back along the same path. And what I mean by that, for example, if right directly into the camera, if I throw a jab directly into it, it comes straight out the pipeline. It goes from here, my finger is up pointing at the lens, and I want to come right back down that pipe. I want to think about, I got a pipe about, let's say 8 inches in diameter. If it had 8 inches, I don't know. Straight down and straight back. I don't want to swim it to the inside. I'm exaggerating. So I don't want to swim it to the inside. I don't want to swim it down or go up. I don't know how people do that, but I've seen it happen. Again, I'm going to be here and right back. Not this slight mode. We see that slight track to the inside, a slight track downward, slight track to the inside. This is where the cross comes in. Slight track to down here. This is where the hook comes in. Also a rear straight. Straight out, straight back. This goes for all punches. If I'm throwing a rear straight shot, if I'm throwing a hook, it's coming along at this arc right here. I'm going to return it basically. I'm going to recock this thing back to the same position. I don't throw it all the way over here and let this loop down to come to position. So I'm paying attention to the positive and the negative, and I'm bringing things back along the exact same path or arc they traveled in. And the other reason we do this, you're open the entire time. Keep in mind, in boxing or any striking, you're going to miss way more than you hit. You're going to throw way more punches. That's why combinations are so important. There's some people only work on knockout punching. Well, good luck. If you got a guy who's got good defense, it's going to be hard to find them. You're going to miss a whole lot, and that's actually what ends up tiring you out. A matter of fact, a good heavy bag drill, of course, I'm discussing it. That should be on. They'll be on other material. Is to have someone who's holding your heavy bag while you're trying to go to town, and occasionally they just jerk this thing out of your path. You see how much this thing pulls you out of play. You've got to learn how to punch in shadow boxing, in mirror work, full force, Sunday punching, everything, and learn how to keep yourself with base. Because a lot of people look really good when they hit a bag, but you start moving them around, they can't do anything with it. So you got to make sure you're able to recover even when you miss, because you're going to miss way more than you hit. Now we're going to start running through the punching arsenal. Some of these will be familiar. We're talking jabs and crosses and stuff, and then we're going to start getting some esoteric ideas. Then later on, we'll start building on the combinations. So right now, the earlier stuff was academic, good stuff. Don't underestimate it. Now we're into the fun stuff, and it hopefully gets progressively more fun from here. Is that enough talk?
Yeah, plenty.
Yeah, it's far too much, isn't it? Okay, on the jab, we've got the standard jab. It's the lead hand punch. I'm in my heel-toe line. The jab, again, we talked about from my long-range stance, comes straight out and straight back in. Something to keep in mind when we're throwing the punches. We talked about the inside ball of the foot being an important portion for the steps and drags and weighting up. This is also the pivot portion for practically all of your punches, the inside ball of the foot. When I throw this jab, I'm already in the heel-toe line. We'll notice as I'm pivoting over that the inside ball of the foot. So I'm here. I'm not staying back here and pivoting and standing with my weight in this position. My weight comes slightly forward over this inside ball of the foot. So when I throw the punch, I'm shifting my weight over the inside ball of the foot for the pivoting motion. And that pivoting motion also means that my hip is turning with it. It also means that the shoulder will be turning with it at the same time. I just don't pivot one independently, or just the hip only or the shoulder only. It's the whole thing. But the key is also that I put the weight on top of the leg. This is important. This is hugely significant. It's just not punching and turning here. Because you notice this didn't give me any extra range on what's going on. Let's pull Mitch in right here. Put my glove on him right here. Right. No extra range on it. Give me back about an inch. Once I put it over the top of the inside ball of the foot, it gave me a little bit more range, and it's also going to allow me to put a little bit more whip in the shot. So when we're throwing it, center your weight over that inside ball of the foot, and it's going to be the same way. I'll show you where all the pivot points are for all the punches, but keep in mind how big of a deal this is. So straight out and straight back with the jab. So it's straight out, straight back, pivoting over on top of it. In this case, we'll throw a bunch, instead of focus pads, keep in mind, at some point we may pull some focus pads on you, but when we're doing our training, for the most part, a lot of your defensive ideas will be played off padding, cuffing, slapping punches out of the way. It's more fun to play live from the very beginning. It starts feeling more real for you. So whenever I throw the jab, Mitch is just going to catch this punch for me right now. Instead of focus pads, he's got on the exact same gloves as I do. Looks like we're shilling for ringside, apparently. They are good gloves, by the way. He's just going to receive that in the palm of the hand. He's going to give a slight slap to the inside, because if you don't, if he's being passive with it, it starts screwing up the shoulder to some degree. Slight pat to the inside while I'm giving the slight pivot over the shoulder for the jab. Straight out, straight back. And notice whenever I'm doing this, on the retraction, I'm not trying to give you straight out, straight back, head in one spot. Get right here. Make sure the overhead plays this out well. It's not just here and here. I might do a few where I'm trying to be a robot, straight out, pivoting, and right back into play to find where this is and come back and stand stock still. But we've already learned that the idea about being a hard target and being the long, short rhythm and long rhythm and stuff. And I'm not going to do anything exaggerated with this because we want to make sure we're keeping this in the confines easy to read in the camera. But when we're throwing, every time I come back, make sure there's some motion with the head, because if you're close enough to hit, you're close enough to be hit. Don't stand there. That's one of the biggest problems with tough man contest. And some NHB players, they stand here and just start throwing this counter-revolution punching. He's throwing at the same time, and you're just sitting there going, hell, I don't know who's going down first. I think it depends on the chin. So you're going to make sure to throw the jab, get a bit of a move. Notice there's a tendency for me to dip on the inside of that one, because I'm thinking about already what the follow-up would be, probably going to be in the rear hand. But jab, straight out over the pivot shot, and out. Straight back into position. Now, with the jab, you can subdivide that. There's a corkscrew jab. So far when I throw the punch, it comes straight out, and I'm going palm down with this thing. So obviously I got my fist closed, but the palm is down on the shot. Now I'm not giving it this vertical punch right here. There's not power in that. There's just not. Think about it. When you're doing a push-up, you got to be doing them this way. You're doing a bench press, you're doing this way. You're pushing people off of you. You do it this way because you're employing more muscle fiber. You got the triceps into it. You got the front delta into it. You got the pecs into it, pushing off. Whenever you start turning, pushing down in this position, you start using only the triceps. So I'm going to recruit as much muscle fiber as possible to put as much power and play into this punch as I can. And this vertical stuff just doesn't cut it in comparison with the going with the palm down version. So this right here, got to tell you, that's, well, it's bullshit. There's nothing else I can say about it. It's got to be here, straight down, recruiting all the fiber we can back into play. Now the corkscrew jab is going to even, it's going to capitalize on that palm down motion. If you realize you're at the front of the fight and your fighter looks dry, you've already determined that you can hit him with a jab to some degree. And by dry, I mean he hasn't greased up his face. There's no Vaseline in play yet. He's not super sweaty yet or anything. And your glove is relatively dry. What you can do is you can time to hit the face. When we're out there, so far I've been palm down. I want to hit, and at the last moment give a slight, if I got my thumb out so we can see, there's a slight cocking down with the thumb here. So I'm out, and it's down in this motion. I'm not going to have my thumb out in the punch, just make sure we can read what we're doing with the hand. Everything else will be in play properly. I'm trying to hit, put a twist on the skin. It's going to be kind of a ripping and tearing shot. Now, you're not going to immediately start tearing flesh on someone, but you get the idea of where the corkscrew jab comes into play. So again, if I'm just hitting Mitch's hand right now, it's not going to really read that I'm doing a corkscrew jab, but you still need to work it. So I'm throwing it out there, getting a slight twist on the shot. And it probably doesn't feel any different to him when I'm hitting, but whenever you're the one throwing it, you have your idea of what you're doing with it and realize where it's used. I mean, you've got your use in it. If he's greased up, don't even shoot it. If your glove is already slick with sweat, it's no time for it. But right at the front of the fight, that's the time to start throwing, put that corkscrew on top of it. Staying on this high level and staying with the straights, you've got your rear straight shot. It can also be called a cross. You can hear me say it interchangeably, but for the rest of this, I'll call it a cross to make sure it's easier to play. Rear hand straight shot. So our jab is the lead hand straight shot. The rear hand straight, we talked about the pivot point before. To build this punch all the way from the bottom up, again, it's this inside ball of the foot. I've got the toe line going, heel toe line going in. I've got to turn. But if I'm turning, though, I'm thinking about turning on that inside ball of the foot, and I'm taking my weight forward again. And I'm taking the weight towards that inside ball of the foot, and so I'm trying to line my weight up on top of it. I'm not leaning over to the outside of it. Lean my weight on top of that inside ball of the foot. So from here, bottom up, that's the motion with it. Take my weight over the top of it, and then as I'm pivoting, I'm bringing this hip forward as I'm turning, and this rear shoulder forward. And the hand will come straight out, again in the palm down position, more muscle fiber recruitment. My chin would be down if I weren't talking all the damn time, and this shoulder would be up. I'm throwing it straight out the pipeline, bringing it straight back down the middle. In this case, Mitch is going to catch it in his rear hand. He's going to take it slow right down. It's going to be turned to here, straight. Here you go. You get the idea. Throw it straight out and straight back. Optimally, I probably should be showing some of these as the robot would, straight out, straight back. But even if you're just throwing standardly into a pad, when you get used to getting some little juke and jive in there, long rhythm, short rhythm, again, make yourself the hard target. Now, we throw the jab high, start throwing the jab low. Two ways to throw it. And I'm going to tell you which one I prefer, and I think it's going to be pretty obvious in a moment. When I throw the jab low, it's the exact same punch, except a lot of people that throw a low jab from the side, you see this, the arm going down. Punching downward, no power in it. Again, think about a bench press. You don't lay on your back and push at this weird angle unless you're on a decline bench, and you're still getting things straight out from your body. Decline is playing everything straight out. So here, I'm going to have to go down to it. It's going to be a low jab from a crouch. So I'm going to start pivoting on this lead foot to the inside like we did on the jab, but I go down with the knee. So we can see this, down with the knee. I still get my weight over that inside ball of the foot and go down and then launch the jab out from this position. So it's here, I'm going to catch him right here on this inside the forearm. Here, here, in, crouch, in, and out. That's the jab I prefer. There is a low jab called a folding jab. I'm going to show it to you to be complete. This is the complete pugilist after all. And I think immediately you're going to see where the problem is, or why I don't advocate it. This folding jab, if you think about, if I'm standing in proper positioning and I'm doing the exact, weighting my weight over the lead foot, the lead inside ball of the foot, if I think about my rear hand turning and touching my toe, see how that bends my body forward? So at the end of the punch, if we think about it, I was touching the toe, and then the jab is coming out at the same time. See this motion? Popular with some old school fighters, but the problem is I think it's slower than the crouching jab, and also it doesn't take into account the street environment. It definitely doesn't take into account the NHB environment where you can be shot on, or the knees, or just someone chopping with an axe shot on the back of your head. So a few for argument's sake, I'm going to turn, think about where the toe touch would be, and that's going to give me the right position for the jab. So it's going to be, see this folding forward at the waist as opposed to crouching forward and leaning into it. So, folding jab, crouching jab, folding jab. Huge difference in my opinion. I advocate the crouching jab, but I do see some people with some success with the folding jab, but not that many. We've thrown the jab low. We got to throw the rear shot low, the cross low. We got to stay with these as straight punches right now. Again, the pivot point we already know for the standard cross is going to be over that inside ball of the foot. At this point, it should be kind of natural. So we threw that up high. Same thing. Then we're going to put the cross on it. We don't have to do a folding jab like we did before in the low jab. We're going to turn, put the crouch on it. We'll reload the weight forward. Straight out of the pipeline, straight back. So it's here, throw. Notice whenever I'm doing this, I'm not throwing this while I'm descending. I'm not going to be dropping this shot down. It's not that easy to drop down on someone's gut. You got to go low and underneath and launch this straight through, catch the short ribs, catch the liver, get the back turn, throw kidney shots if you're playing that kind of rough game. Turn and back in. Get a little bit of a juke and jump. Actually, when you're throwing these low shots, we'll discuss more of this later. When you're throwing a low shot, you need to either come back up with a high shot or move out immediately. But right now, I'm just going to move the head around. We'll get into more of that later. So it's turn, straight out, straight back. We've already thrown the cross high, cross low. You're getting the idea. Start throwing the hook, lead hook. Incredibly valuable punch. Again, repeating a couple ideas from extreme boxing, we're going to expand on that. When you're throwing that hook, again, we're talking about inside ball of the foot. We're going to weight over that lead leg, and we got the slamming the door analogy, where this is the hinge, the upper body's the door. You're going to slam this door all the way through. Slam. And we're hitting. Now you get the arm when you're throwing one fused piece of bone. The hook is not going to be something that slows, going to this angle and drop it down here. You don't start throwing the hook, start pushing or extending through a hook. So his hand is up. I'm not turning and trying to do this with it. And I'm also not going to over rotate with this thing as well. What I'm trying to do whenever I throw this hook low forward, I'm going to keep this in line where we talked before with the standard on guard position, where this is right in line with the shoulder. I'm just going to move this up still in line with the shoulder. So whenever I throw, this stays in line with the shoulder the whole way. It's not going to start moving past it, and it's not going to stay behind it. It stays with the shoulder. You'll probably see that on the overhead. So we're right here, turn, bam, throw the hook, in. And I'm throwing the hook. I got two ways to put the hand positioning. I can have my hand facing me, which I prefer. Explain why. We're talking about having maximum muscle fiber recruitment. In this case, I get to be able to pull in the biceps. It's a natural position, like you're doing a bicep curl. We all know that whenever you turn your hand over and do a reverse curl, you're able to do a lot less weight on this thing. So I want to use the maximum amount of muscle fiber recruitment that's hand facing. If I go with the palm down, which you can do, but you got to be careful. Make sure you're hitting with those back three knuckles, particularly if you're playing with light gloves, you're going barehanded, you're hitting with the front ones. On this hand down position, you start pronating this wrist to some degree, goosenecking yourself out, rendering that lead hand useless. When you throw with the hand down, it's very similar to just doing a hammer curl or that reverse curl. So I think with the palm facing me, I get more recruitment. It's up to you to play with both versions. So we got palm facing and then palm down. So we got a couple with the palm facing and palm down, right back into play. Now we got that high lead hook. There's another variation on that high lead hook. You can do a whip hook. And actually you could do this one. It's a little bit more of an outside range. But so far we hit a 90-degree fused piece of bone when we throw a standard hook. On the whip hook, again, we can take this hook and we can move it out a little bit to some degree. Bam, throw it right in here. Whip hook, whenever I'm throwing it, the last moment I'm kind of pulling in as if I was going to punch myself in the upper pec. It's never going to come that far. That's the motion I'm thinking about. So instead of this, from the overhead, we can probably see that just fine. We're going to actually see this motion of rotating this thing back into play. So we're here. Has a little bit more stink on it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry. No, if I miss, it's my bad. Get the idea. A little bit more of a whip on this thing. I recommend playing with both. I go back and forth in between just the standard palm facing with the fused piece of bone and the whipping that thing back in. I do not throw palm down at all. Some people play that game real well, so make sure you do have that in the arsenal. Also, while we're on these lead hooks, you got the corkscrew hook. Very similar to you think about when you see a tie elbow that comes down at this diagonal angle. Same thing, I'm looking to hit this guy. If he's in a nice moving crouch position, boom, with the brachial plexus, behind the ear, the temple, whatever the hell you can get. For the feed, it's going to be that lead hand up and over. I'm not going to stand and hit this at a low angle like I presume we're in this infight. So if we were playing the game, I'm actually hitting him over the top. It's basically doing a cross with the lead hand. So I'll get a little bit low with it and down. Again, I'm coming in with the palm facing towards the ground, a little bit towards me. It's facing this downward angle. And I get a little bit of a whip in on it as well. So we're here. Get the idea. When we're throwing those hooks, you got the rear hooks as well. Same thing. Inside ball of the foot, weighting the leg forward, moving in with the rear hook, fused piece of bone. Tougher to do a whip on this thing. Can be done, but fused piece of bone. I'm not going to have you work on these as much because this is an easy punch to read and see coming. It's best used in combination, but we'll talk about it. Turn, fused piece of bone, staying in line with the shoulder, like we talked about with the lead hook. In. Again, notice I'm weighting everything over that lead ball of the foot, and in. Now we're throwing the hooks at the high level. Obviously we can throw them at the low level as well. The low lead, bam. Notice I'm not throwing it down, I'm not dropping my hand. Throwing it right here to expose this. Got to crouch. Notice I crouch and again weight forward over this lead leg. I'm not staying back here and throwing it where it's all arm. Boom, getting forward over the rear hook, same, getting forward over it. So we whip them out on both sides. right in here, hook, hook, go down to it, go down to it. Not punching here, not punching here, not staying back with my weight 50-50. Go down to it, go down to it. Bam, 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 bam. Get the idea. Building that arsenal. It's going to get more fun here in a few minutes. Well, after the hooks, obviously we got to get to the uppercuts, which are basically just throwing a vertical hook. But there's a little bit more mechanics with the hips into play with this, since we don't get to really throw a pivot, because this is coming straight up. Everything else has been always to kind of juke the hips and the shoulders back and forth. Uppercut is coming up from the floor, well, not with the arms literally, but we got to think about if I'm throwing a lead uppercut, I got to make sure I'm still using that same fused piece of bone that we used in the hook whenever we're throwing this, as we saw in the overhead, right through here. Fused piece of bone, I don't come up to the end of the uppercut and start extending the arm up. As we also did before in the hook, where we talked about this is in line with the shoulder, and it doesn't move past the shoulder line or lag behind it. Same thing, we're throwing the uppercut, I'm in line with the shoulder line as we're rising up. If I rise above, it's not going to be more than a 3 inch variance, and we're not going to be underneath it. We're going to try to make sure the shoulder is what's dipping up with us. But since we can't pivot over the inside ball of the foot with the lead foot, we're going to make sure we're driving off with that inside ball of the foot. So when the punch from the ground up and we're throwing that hook, is I got to make sure my hook is in position. It's going to be a slight turning into my opponent, it's turning into my target. So I'm going to make sure that we're on the feet, we're facing in, I'm facing you. Slight turn in. And there's a slight bending of the knees at the same time. Whenever I start to drive up, I'm driving, even though you can't really read it, I'm driving up with the inside ball of the foot. Again, this is the key. This is where everything comes from in the floor up in your boxing and your pugilism. Driving up. The heel doesn't necessarily come off the mat. I can exaggerate it where the heel would come up and the outside ball of the foot would be up, but it's really, I'm just feeling it's that inside. That's where the pressure is rising up through. And we're getting with the hips. Hips will be turning and punching forward, so in a sense I can still load over the top of that lead inside ball of the foot. Since I can't pivot over it, I still want to load on top of it. So whenever I throw the uppercut from this profile, I can load here. This means I'm just using the deltoids to raise the arm up into position. Let me go ahead and get your hand right about here, Mitch. So I'm throwing it here. If I'm just doing this and I keep my hips back, I can throw it for all I'm worth, and it'll just be the arm, okay? It's hard for me to keep my hips out of it. What I want to do, though, is load the hips forward and overneath.
You invented that word.
Yes, I did. Forward and overneath. Forward and over the top of the inside ball of the foot. I'm going to get this forward so I can rise up through. Whenever I'm rising up, there is an exact curve underneath this camera. Be straight up, rising up right over that inside ball of the foot. So here we're just the arm or overneath. Going to stand up through it. That's where he feels it now. It's here, loading on top. Get that hip right on top of the inside ball of the foot, rising up. Notice we're not moving me on the shoulder line. So here, straight up. Now when we throw the rear uppercut, looking for the same mechanics. I'm going to have to turn into them. So it's here on my heel toe. I'm going to have to turn this hip and this body forward and towards it when I'm throwing up. Throwing up, vomiting.
Throwing up again.
Whenever I'm doing this, though, I can't load over this rear foot, because if I'm loading over the rear inside ball of the foot, notice this still keeps my weight back, and it's still just the arm doing the work. So I've got to turn, and I'm thinking about this hip trying to be placed towards this inside ball of the foot. So it's here, turn. That's where there's a little bit more stink on this. Turn. Get the hip aimed towards it. Now it's going to be impossible to get everything lined up right on top of it, and your base would be too short at that time. But if you think about advancing it towards that inside pivot point, that's where the power is going to come from. To here, turn, up. Get the idea. Lead advances, and the rear advances. These are small points, but they're huge. Like, you play with those ideas, but you're going to get the idea. Now your target when you're throwing the lead uppercut, these are body shots. You can hit the chin, but if you always think about, really on a hook, on a hook or the straight shots, the jabs and the crosses, we thought about hitting the head. We thought about hitting the body. The uppercut, I'm always thinking about digging straight in towards the liver and just driving the punch up the center. So if I eat the liver, that's good. If he has to be leaning over when I'm throwing it, it's still going to travel up and catch the chin. So in other words, where I was choosing all my targets on the straight shots and the hooks, here I'm only choosing a single target and letting his body position dictate what's going to be hit by it. So in this sense, this punch is kind of a gift punch at this point. So I will hit the liver, and I can hit the chin. I'm not looking for him. However, if he's a little bit more concave, it's going to be the chin. If he's a little bit more upright, it's going to be a body shot. Probably makes pretty good sense. There's a few things to keep in mind with the rear uppercut, or both uppercuts actually. These are not opening punches. You do not lead with an uppercut. We can't be out here boxing and then me run all the way to here to throw an uppercut. Too much range. I can be killed by too many things. When we're throwing the uppercuts, the lead uppercut will be a faster motion because you don't have to load the body up nearly as much. But that doesn't mean you got to undervalue the rear uppercut. The rear uppercut is very useful for inside fighting. We're going to have a whole section on infighting, but I want to go ahead and preview some concepts with this while we're talking about this uppercut right now. When we're infighting, there's a lot of boxing and juking and jiving and banging with the elbows. And you notice when we're doing this, the range is too short for me to start retracting and pulling in this lead uppercut. But lots of times when we're here in a match stance, this rear uppercut has a hell of a lot of room. So while you're working on just standard throwing your uppercuts against the target, bam, bam, start working a little bit of footwork with it. You can advance on the uppercut. So if he's got this out, and it'll be right here, take a little bit of a step, drag forward, and throw that uppercut. And again, I wouldn't be leading with it. How I'd be actually have a tactical application. But right here, and he starts backing off from me. Sorry about that.
No, that's
anyway.
right. That's what
we're here, and I feel him leave. His pressure comes off my head because I'm trying to bury my head into him. When he leaves, a slight step in to throw that. I can also throw this with a slight retreat where he's got his target on my head. Right here, I'm going to back up and then throw the rear uppercut. So we're here, bam. Here, a little bit of a shift here, but it's still an okay shift because I have to step back and load up. It looks like I should step back and run right into this lead uppercut, but I might be using this in a real situation. We're here and I'm feeling overwhelming pressure. I didn't want to back up, so I might be posting out to open up the shot. So you're going to work it with an advance, you're going to work it with a retreat, and you also need to work on the stepping an outside and inside version. So we're right here. I'm going to work on, I feel it on my head, step out, and bang up the center. So right here. Also step inside with it, kind of a wheel. Step this foot to the inside, bit of a pivot as I turn with it. Let's go a little bit at this angle right about here. So here, turn, pivot, and launch that rear uppercut. So it's here. Notice in all these others, so far we've been out and away from the target. These uppercuts, we know they're inside fights. Get used to it. If you're using focus pads or just the gloves like we usually play the game, keep it in tight. It's an in-fight, so make sure you feel some contact, cohesion on your body. Now, moving beyond the uppercut, we're going to split the difference between an uppercut and a hook. You have shovel hooks, where hooks are traveling at the horizontal angle, uppercuts are in the vertical angle. Now we're going to start taking this 45 and up angle, and these are shovel hooks as you think about using a shovel, throwing the dirt over your shoulder. Now again, fused piece of bone. There can be a little bit of whip action, but I think you're going to find it's useful just to keep the fused piece of bone on this. And the pivoting with the lead shovel uppercut. Again, get the weight over that lead leg. Use a lot of the exact same mechanics as you use in the uppercut. So using this angle, you get to split it a little bit, come to this direction, and pull back into play. Again, it's like the uppercut. You're not leading with these. These are body killers. It's an inside punch fight. So we're here. That is the lead shovel hook. On the rear, same thing. I will never be able to get all my weight over that lead pivot point, but that's where I'm thinking about advancing to. So again, it's that 45 angle, splitting the difference. So with the lead, with the rear, get the idea. One more hook to look at right now. It's a kangaroo hook. It's meant to cover distance. Floyd Patterson used it from his peekaboo style, particularly on fighters like Ingmar Johansson or Johansson, depending on who you're listening to pronounce it. If you're listening to me, pick one of the two and maybe you're right. Got to cover that distance in the kangaroo. It's going to be a loose, open hook, almost a whip hook. Some would call it a Navy hook. Thanks for reminding me of that. A whip hook can also be a Navy hook. But I am on the outside. I can't touch him with this shot. So I'm over here. I'm going to use that big step and drag to hit. But in the kangaroo hook, yeah, we're throwing this in here just to be complete, historically accurate about a lot of the punches that are available to you. But sometimes it does have its uses. Usually if you got to cover a lot of distance with a guy you can't get to, lunging jabs are going to be the key. There is a hook that can work for you. Big step and drag, but it's actually going to be kind of a hopping step and drag. Yeah, keep in mind you could be running right into that rear hand. So make sure you understand where you're using this. Have your hands cocked and loaded, kind of in a stage fashion. We could be in the long range, but I would go ahead and start kind of maneuvering myself back to a cage fashion, get ready to jump, bam, and then throw that hook. So it's basically a hook with a hop in front of it, hence kangaroo hook. Right here. It's not pretty, and it's lungy, but it can have its uses in that long-range fight. Keep in mind, there's tighter things to do, but as I keep saying, it does have its uses. If you just can't get to the inside and your lunge jabs are being picked off, it can't start looking like you're doing a lunge jab at the last moment. It comes to the outside for that new angle. Maybe able to clock this guy with it. In boxing, we've got the orthodox arsenal, which we've just run through for you. The jabs, the crosses, the hooks, the uppercuts, the shovel hooks. Basically, those punches are what's going to make up the huge majority of the material that you're going to have in a standard boxing game, a standard NHB game, or even in a street game. But there are several unorthodox shots that come from old school pugilism. Some of these were originally legal shots. They're no longer legal, but they're in play in this old school material we're getting ready to play with. Some of these shots were accidental, and lots of, I'll point out where you could be throwing them. Hey, it's an accident, you might as well exploit your accident. And then some of them are just basically dirty shots. They only have the only place they have is straight out street brawl or in a grudge match where you hate someone. And we're going to make sure, for argument's sake, we have all this material. I'm going to show you where it comes into play. But most of the illegal shots are meant to be combined with the orthodox boxing material. And again, we're going to stay with this little academic one-for-one thing where we show you here's a shot. We showed you here's a high jab, here's a low jab on. We do the same thing with these unorthodox shots or these illegal shots, the dirty shots. And then we're going to show you towards the end of this little arsenal section how you can combine the orthodox with the unorthodox arsenal. Then you start seeing how standard combinations start going through the roof with how much you can hurt another human being, whether it's light gloves or better yet, bare knuckle. First off, we got the Louisville sluggers. These are shots that land with the outer edge of the forearm. And since it requires so much of a swinging motion, they're not meant to be leaders. They're not meant to be the first thing out of the pipeline. For example, I don't stand here and wait, okay, now here's my big swing with the forearm. They're meant to be used primarily whenever you miss with the hook. Now, you got your choice. I can throw, and he can pull that focus pad out of the way, and I can miss with the hook, and it's recovered to position and go back to standard boxing. But I also have the opportunity at that point for a missed hook to throw a Louisville slugger. It can come off a missed lead hook or rear hook. In this case, again, I'm going to throw here, I'm going to miss, come back with the outer edge of the forearm, and I'm whipping it, not just with the arm. The whole body turns back into it as I come back over that pivot point on the lead foot. So it's going to be here, bam. Okay, I'm going to swing it back. You ready? Mitch, back in, miss, bam, miss, bam. And you get the idea when we're throwing it. We're looking for anywhere. It's not choosy. Just hit with something and go on. And also, I should keep in mind, when you're throwing punches, don't stop and assess damage. Everything's about combinations, so we get a section of combinations coming up where we go exhaustive with it. You can't throw punches in singles. Everything's meant to be a buzzsaw, moving forward or staying aggressive the entire time. So you throw things like these Louisville sluggers and some of these illegal shots. They look like they're immediate droppers, and a lot of them are. That's why they're illegal, because it's dangerous to your opponent. You still would want to be able to throw right on top of it. For example, I'd throw that hook, come back with the Louisville slugger, bam, maybe I come in with that overhand, right back with the an uppercut, but more on that later. Make sure they're not thrown in isolation. So how he can feed with it. He can feed with the hook. What I should be doing on this game is every time I throw the hook and I catch with it, and sometime my feeder can go, he pulls out, and that means he's telling me to come back, bam, immediately with that slugger. So we'll go, bam, bam, bam. So make sure you got any combination. So again, he's dictating whenever I come back to him. I don't get to choose the shot. He's telling me when these things are happening. A slugger can also be used as a cram. It's still the outside edge of the forearm, and it's nothing more than, we'll go hands down a moment. We're in here, I'm just running into him with the forearm. It's just a straight in cram. It's meant to be close on the infight. I do this on a heavy bag all the time. When I'm working in tight, take this forearm and slam it straight up, trying to catch the nose under the jaw, and then I can start jamming in for low body work. So it would be this position right here with some aggression on it. So he can just pad out this position. I could be in tight, cram up. You see, it's just like, looks like a rising block from traditional martial arts to a large degree. Here, cram, and then come in and work the body. Cram it up, cram it up. If it's a higher range, just walking that forearm straight through his body. In addition to Louisville sluggers, all the other illegal shots, we've got hammers. Basically what they sound like, they're hammer fists, where you close the fist up, hit him in that bottom, meaty portion of the fist. Now, when we're using these, when we're calling them hammer shots, we're going to show you the axe punches, which are the close range versions of these. We're working in the outside range. Here's where you can choose to use these. These can be leaders. Any place where you feel like a long hook is appropriate. But you'll be surprised, actually what can have more power in it is turning the hand over and using this hammering portion. It's a little bit more of an awkward shot to throw. It can be a little bit slower than a standard hook, but has the ability to save your hand. So let's say you're in a standard match. Let's say you felt a knuckle go. You felt a boxer's fracture come on, and you're like, oh shit, okay, busted a finger, or somewhere in the metacarpals, this is hurting. You can turn this over. Not to say it's not going to hurt to land this shot, hurts a lot less. Or perhaps you've been foresightful enough to be thinking on the street. A lot of times we get primitive, we think maybe we train with palm strikes all the time, but as soon as we hit the street, you get mad, you clench your fist and you start wailing away. On the street, that hammer shot is a great one to hit. So again, he's going to feed just like he would a standard hook, but I'm on the outside, I'm turning this over, we can see this turn. Look at this, I'm still leaning over that inside edge of the foot. All the mechanics are the same, except this hand, it turns over from the outside. It's here to here. That motion there is a few. And Mitch can tell you, these hit hard. Okay, we're here. And keep in mind, you can come back in on top with combinations. We're not doing them yet, but you can see with the body juking, you're always trying to get yourself in position to return with something. It's not always ever supposed to be a fight like this. Bam! That hurt? Yeah, you got to keep hitting and throwing and throwing and throwing. Now, that was a forward horizontal hammer. You can throw these as back hammers. The same thing, it can be a missed long whip hook, where before we did the whip hook, went to here. Let's say I've done the whip and I've missed on it. Again, where the cram would be, the Louisville slugger with the outside forearm, here, it's going to be this back hammer position to here. So we get the idea. Miss, come back. So I'm looking for that whip hook. Gone. There's the shot. And again, he can feed for me, except he'll give me 2 to 1. I'll give him 2 whip hooks. He'll draw back, back hammer. Get the idea. Hammers forward into the rear. You've also got the option of throwing these things as verticals. If he's down in a low position, low in fight opposite, look at these targets right here. Rabbit punching with them. These work. You can get slight angles on these things. A slight downward diagonal. You can use your imagination on these. One historical use of these, let me turn you momentarily. Battling Nelson, short ribs dig right here. If he could work and get a guy's hands high, whenever he was working the short ribs, I'm going to go ahead and pull them all the way up. Mitch doesn't fight this way. You can throw your hook this way, but trust me, these hit harder. So when we're throwing this, bam, that's the shot. This is the one that you want to hit those ribs with. Totally legal in standard competition, but not for you pugilists out there. So how you can train it, when I'm doing this, if you want to give me 2 hands on it, whatever it feels. Does that work for you? 1 hand, whatever works best.
You want to do it just on the arm?
You want to? Right here. So we work an upper body. Bang, 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 bang. Bang, bang, bang. Get the idea. Work those ribs. Anytime that arm's out of the way, you're going to ask yourself, what's the benefit of turning it over? Well, look at this. I'll pretend, even though I would never throw him with a rear hand, if he's got a nice body cover, you see how easy it is for me to eat the point of that elbow? Uppercut. If he turns just right, I lose the hand. Shovel. Even on a hook, if he's slightly up on it, bad news. But if I realize, hey, I think this guy's got great body cover. If you realize the guy's always hitting with uppercuts and hooks. But if he's down all the time, bam, use these hammers and Nelson digs so you can save your hands and still beat the hell out of this guy's arms. There's a tricky shot you can use on it. It's a dirty shot. I'm just throwing it out there for historical accuracy. Don't advocate using it because you want to train hard. But play this game as gentlemen because that's what it is. It's a game. There's a touch gloves thing, and I'm only going to lightly talk about how people come out, touch gloves before the fight, move on to reach with the one hand. The key is people usually touch this way, give a slight this way. We talked about the hammers. People reach out, you look right here on top of the knuckles. When you're doing this, you think about, go ahead and open up your hand and feed for it. Whenever I reach out touching gloves, I give him a short shot like that. While he's reaching out to touch gloves on me, I'm already looking to do some fist damage on this guy before the match started. Okay, it's an asshole thing to do, but historically, it is there. So when these guys come out, we're touching gloves. So you see people, hey, we're good to go. So just turn your hands over this time. Slight motion right there, but it's too late. The ref turns to you, hey, none of that. We're not going to do any of that. But you've already accomplished what you were looking to do. So, again, I'm not advocating it. I'm pointing out that this does indeed exist. So keep in mind, in a few moments, whenever I show you the axe punches, which are basically going to be the closer range version of the hammers, but keep in mind, for the most part, you want to be using hammers and the sluggers and everything we've shown you so far off of missed orthodox boxing shots. Let your boxing set up the dirty versions of what we're doing right now. The hacksaw is another forearm shot. This is definitely one of those that's an accidental, incidental, opportune shot. I'm not looking to ever land a hacksaw. It's just, hey, I screwed up. He's juked out of the way of a punch. I'm going to finish it off. These are dead off of straight shots where the Louisville sluggers were clearly an opening up, a slam, or with the cram motion. It's still the outside of the forearm, but it's more of a cutting motion, hence the name hacksaw. So, for example, let's tell you what. We can turn your back to the camera momentarily. Right? If I throw a jab and I plant with it, terrific. But if he kind of slips out of the way of this jab and I've missed it, standard boxing, you can say, I missed the jab, you got to get a recovery back on it. What you can also do, as soon as you realize that someone's, you've missed on one of your hacksaws, you've missed, you can start juking your punch to the outside where there's still a little bit of a cramming motion with this punch as it comes in. So straight into the camera, what I'm talking about, if I throw a jab straight out and down the pipeline, and if I miss on this, I'm going for my target, he goes to the inside or the outside with a slip, straight back in. But as soon as I realize, usually you're going to realize you're missing it when the fist doesn't make contact. Usually you'll still get to the end of the punch because you put full commitment into it. So as it's coming out, because if you kind of juke towards the side that he's taking his body, that can give you enough of a contact position with the forearm. For the hacksaw, it's not a stopper. It's just something else to be evil while you're playing the game. So, for example, I'll tell you what the best way to show this. Maybe we can do two hands this way, right here. I'm going to show. I'm going to look for this hand, and he's going to slightly move to the outside of it. So right here, so whenever I hit, it's actually have to be this forearm shot as it comes in. I want this hand. Bam, I want this right here. But whenever he pulls it, I give him that forearm. So it's a small motion. So it's going to be here, and I miss with it. It's the outside of the forearm. It continues to cut across. You see how I'm catching everything in its path. So it can be done with the outside of the forearm. To his best effect, always going to be the upper shot because the lower body shot makes no sense to hacksaw across the torso. Some say it can be done across the inner forearm. I just don't see it happening. So I think we can already see if I miss and he goes to the inside of it, there's a chance for him to get caught on the inside of the forearm, but it's getting closer to a popper, which we're going to discuss here in a few moments. But the hacksaw, again, we miss a straight shot, and I'll let this driving in do it. And again, I don't leave it out there, so I'm going to do two land with the jab, one with the hacksaw. But no matter what shot it is, all three, I got a fast negative reaction on it. So it's bam, here, 1, 2, 3, right back in. So hacksaw's off the missed shot. It just takes a little bit of training to keep in mind how the hacsaws come into play, and you can start making it happen on every single one of your shots. And I tell you, even though it is a dirty shot, it's very hard for a ref to read. So
it keeps me from being able to retaliate.
Right, and don't let me be the one to tell you to be slipping that kind of illegal shot in, but just like I said, it's hard for a ref to read. Make of that what you will. And we talked about the hammer shots being outside blow with the hammer portion of the fist. The axe as punches are the exact same thing. They're short range hammers. And what we're doing here whenever we hit, before we're hitting from this outside position. What we're doing, we're always on the inside with these shots, the exact same thing. We're looking at the target, the temple, the neck, the brachial plexus. These can be done at this horizontal angle. Usually best here can be done these downward at a 45, this kind of an X angle position. They can also be done a little bit of a short shot to the inside. There's not, here the technique, you can feed all the angles you want. We can just stay close with it. I can feel this right here. I'm going to hit right here. Open up, feel it, hit it, a slight downward 45, where before we were doing these from the outside. Everything's nice and tight. You can do it from this side. Bam, bam. You get the idea on this. It can be horizontal. The 45 with it can also be this slight, like a cram. Either one. Okay, I'll hit this way right here. A little bit short shot to the inside because we could be close on the bam and cram directly into that nose, come right across with that rear hand shot. You get the idea where all these things are all going to start combining together. More concepts to keep in mind. Hitchhiking, which you start using the thumb. Modern gloves, the thumbs are secured to the remainder of the glove, and thumbing doesn't come into play anymore. You gotta ask yourself, well, why are the gloves part of it? I mean, the thumb's part of the glove now, because people used to use the thumbs in the match. So old school gloves, the thumbs were separate. You notice in NHB, your thumbs are out there hanging on their own, and also for the street, you got the availability of the thumbs. There's no way around. Thumbing is definitely a dirty trick. It's a dangerous trick, so I'm only showing you thumbing for those of you who are combining this into a street arsenal. This is not meant for competition. It's not meant whether it's NHB of any sort, even grudge matching, because it's dangerous stuff to play with. When you're throwing the hitchhiking using the thumb, you're thinking about throwing jabs, same kind of jab technique or cross technique, but opening up the hand. And you're trying to not catch with the end of the thumb, catch with this inner web of the hand. And that could be anywhere across the eyes. It can be directly into the throat. But we're thinking about this same kind of throwing everything out with a total commitment. I'm throwing these as jabs and crosses, but with this open, thinking about this portion of the hand. And obviously, you can't really have your partner feed for that kind of thing. We're just making ourselves aware of where these things are. If you can throw jabs and crosses with any kind of energy and accuracy, the thumbing, the hitchhiking is going to come into play with it. Now, you can use these inside the clinch, the long-range position, and keep in mind you can not just use the thumbs if you want. You can change this off to spearing. You can keep the hand closed, just hit with that long-range finger jab. All the things we should probably be somewhat familiar with from standard street combatives. Just closing the fingers up, hitting straight at it. The same thing. These things are still the same thing as throwing jabs. Just get the hand in this particular position when we throw these things out. When we're using these things to the inside, it can be short shots. Again, I'm using that thumbing, coming across, hitting the neck. Thumbing, we'll notice we come right in here, comes through, and it still hits the eye. We just got the hand open. The thumb is a mighty useful tool, but we see it moves beyond dirty. It moves into dangerous, and it is strictly a self-defense tool. But keep in mind, it's the exact same mechanics as throwing a jab or a cross. Just get a little bit more finesse on it because you're trying to aim right in here. Again, keep in mind, you'll injure yourself if you're aiming for the tip of the thumb. You're going to start dislocating it, folding it back. Right here, not much of a problem. Continuing on, let's take a look at a shot we called a popper. This one usually works best for wrestlers, particularly inside of a collar and elbow clinch. Inside the collar and elbow clinch, I would have this shot right in here, and I would just ballistically open up my arm and catch him with the inside of the bicep, the inside of the forearm. I mean, he's got a pretty good wallop on this sort of thing. If you can just put up the hand, let me hit this, boom, this kind of shot right in here. This guy's getting over a pretty nasty head cold. I've been doing the same kind of thing, so I'm going to actually let him bang me with this one. He'll use this one. I'm going to get in close. He's going to open up. I'm going to grip my teeth because this will hit hard, even though this is soft tissue. Bang, just slam it. There you go. Get the shot. That's it overhead. Let people see me. Yes, it sucks. But you'll notice in boxing, pugilism is going to be less useful than it is for the wrestler because this sort of clinch doesn't happen, or it shouldn't happen because of banging the body. It makes, yeah, you're thinking if you're going to set this up, you're going to go, oh, I'm going to clinch with a collar and elbow just so I can throw the popper. There's more effective things to do. Now, how it can be set up in boxing, we talked about using missed hooks. We use missed hooks and come back with a Louisville slugger. We've used a cram, we used a hammer, we can use an axe punch. You can also have a missed hook where actually you throw it, he ducks to the inside of my body. Now when we get here, bam, this is we continue on with the popper. So you get the idea. We throw, miss, bam, continue on, catch him with it. Now how this can work on a feeding is I'm throwing hooks. throw a hook, and one time he'll bring in this glove, and I got to get used to opening up and slamming with the bicep. So we'll do this to 2 and to the 1. So 2 hooks, come to the inside, so bang, 1, 2, 3. Get the idea? He just brings it slightly forward. And it's not going to feel much whenever you open up that arm into the glove, but it gets you used to the idea of when you miss with the hook and your arm's still in position, whenever it comes to the inside, to open up with it. If he fed the glove to the back to the outside, we know it's going to be back to the Louisville Slugger or a hammer or an axe shot. So going to be here, here to the inside, open up. Now the poppers can be used as setups because obviously whenever you hit, you'll notice, we can take a look at the overhit. When he hits my head, how it takes it off to this side. Whenever he opens it up, he could bang me with an elbow, or he can just start banging me with a hook off this ridge side, but he'll bang me with this, full speed, and then just show where he could set up any kind of insert from here. So we're in tight, bang! Oh, it's gonna hurt so bad just having that head taken directly with that hand. And it's an attractive setup, and it's fun to get lulled into thinking I'm gonna go ahead and start working it, slamming it to the other side, but I'm telling you, this clinch is too loose for a pure striking game. You're gonna have to go for a tighter clinch, a tighter boxing clinch. We'll talk more about clinching later on, but keep in mind it should be more used for boxing and the pugilist off of the missed to the inside hook position. In addition to poppers, we've got shrugs. Now shrugs should be used closer inside of kind of a loose clinch, sometimes of a tight clinch, and it's just shrugs are using the shoulders as weapons. They're not devastating shots. You're not going to finish a guy, but we're talking about always roughing people in the clinch, always keeping an offense going on, always being aggressive. Now inside the clinch, they can be used in an upward shrugging position or an advancing shrugging position. So clinching properly in boxing, I'm going to have to be monitoring the arms, whether I've got strictly overhook or I'm getting some bicep right on this thing. Let me turn. The upward being, notice this shoulder is underneath his chin. At the same time, he's got the same thing going on me. It's just whoever thinks of it first. Here I got my thumb laying inside of his bicep to stop this shoulder, but here I'm looking at rising this thing up. If we're slightly looser, I'm coming in on the clinch, I'm running that shoulder forward. Now this is the sort of thing that's hard to drill into a focus pad, but it is the kind of thing whenever you're drilling your standard clinch where you could be moving around this way, you need to put headgear on this guy and feed into the shoulder, slamming this thing forward to some degree, and then sometimes coming underneath, getting a slight raise up underneath the armpit. So I'm slamming into here and coming up under here. All of these would never be the target when I'm actually fighting. Wanting to go into the throat, into the chin, up underneath the chin, but then again, the hands are the target I'm looking for whenever I'm fighting as well. So we got to think about it. We're here, slamming forward, up with it, slam, constant motion. Now we're doing this from an artificial position, being slightly on the outside. It'd be more like when we're trying to come in and get that clinch position and slamming on the inside, then going back to either controlling the clinch and then going back into your standard work. Again, it doesn't stop. So even if you catch him in the chin, it's just part of the cumulative damage, the part of the overwhelming buzzsaw attack of never stopping what you're doing and never using the clinch as a resting position.